everyone, and thank you for tuning in from wherever you are in the world for this session of Veterans Advanced Energy Week. We hope you were able to join us for that interesting conversation on military microgrids earlier this afternoon, and that you all had the opportunity to engage with recruiters from TerraPower. My name is Jennifer Rocha, Executive Director of Innovation Programs for TechConnect, and I will be your moderator for this session. I am pleased to be joined today by an esteemed panel as we discuss energy innovation for the Department of Defense. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes from me. This event is on the record, and we are currently live streaming on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We encourage you to post about what you hear today and share on social media using the hashtag VetsEnergyWeek and by tagging us at AC Global Energy and vets_energy. If you would like to participate in our conversation, we encourage you to submit your questions in the Q&A portal located at the bottom of your screen at any time during the event, and we will incorporate them as appropriate. Please note, however, only those directly engaging via the Veterans Advanced Energy app will be able to submit questions. Now, I'd like to turn our panel over to our keynote speaker. It is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Amanda Simpson, Vice President of Research and Technology at Airbus Americas, and the former Deputy Assistant Secretary for Operational Energy. Thank you so much for being here. Ms. Simpson, over to you.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to the Atlantic Council and for this conference. I think it's wonderful, and I appreciate the opportunity to join you all today. You know, I think it was, and it's not really sure whether it was Napoleon or Alexander the Great, said that an army marches on its stomach. But anyone who's been involved with the military and say, oh, I don't know, the last 100 years, probably realizes that today's military advances with energy. Energy is absolutely crucial and necessary for the operations and effectiveness of our troops. And while I was, as the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, and prior to that, the Executive Director for the Army Office of Energy Initiatives, we looked at the impacts and the reliance of our military on energy and how it impacted our effectiveness and our ability to run operations on a global scale. You know, everything today seems to have an on-off switch, which means it demands energy. So whether it's going to be, you know, our ships and planes and tanks, ground vehicles, or our computers, our communication devices, our information systems, I mean, everything today relies upon energy. And so our susceptibility, our risks that are around energy are of great concern to the military. And in my previous roles, we examined that and tried to find mitigations to alleviate the risks that came about because of our reliance on energy. I certainly realize that everyone here recalls the convoys stretching across the deserts of fuel trucks and water and supplies, and what that meant to not only the troops that were reliant upon those convoys, but also those troops and contractors that were operating those, and the susceptibility and the impact of roadside bombs to try to take out and disrupt our ability to supply our troops. Now, there's so many different ways that we have to examine how energy impacts our military, right? We always want to focus on the impacts of capability and our ability to improve effectiveness of our weapon systems through either the reduction of reliance upon energy and the supply chain, improving efficiency, or wherever possible, replacing the energy sources with alternatives that can be either found in the field or are renewable, such as wind, solar, thermal, and a variety of other technologies. I remember when we were in office, we were looking at a variety of really novel applications, including utilizing the energy from marching or from a dismounted soldier to generate electricity to power those systems that they carry, or utilizing sea currents and the wind and thermals to keep unmanned vehicles aloft for not only hours, but days. What we're seeing today, and I'm now, no longer within the Department of Defense, but in the commercial community, we're seeing a huge shift towards the reliance or towards the utilization of renewables and low emission technologies. Why? Because there's an increased concern on the environmental impact of the utilization of energy. And we see that in the military. We see that in rising waters at our military installations. We see that the environmental impacts cause migrations and disruption of peoples around the world that lead to the conflicts that we end up getting involved in. So we have to always recall and remember the impact of energy on our ability to conduct operations and what that means to a global society. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we're about to have. I'm keeping my remarks short so you can hear from everybody and we can then address the questions. So I'm going to turn it right on back to Jennifer. So thanks for giving me that time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ms. Simpson. Fantastic. You've given us the perfect overview, and I knew you would, because I think I remember when you were in the Pentagon. So I really appreciate that. And so this panel has some fantastic energy warriors on it. So to ensure that we hear from everyone, each of the panelists we have a question for, and you will learn a lot, not only about who they are in terms of their role within their current position or within the military. You will also learn about how they've applied either their veteran military technology experience to really helping us with this energy fight and this battle. And what's really fantastic is when you think about the Department of Defense, as Amanda so nicely illustrated, to think about energy and its impact not only on national security and the warfighter, but the evolving role that the DoD is now taking, and she also noted this in private industry, to think about the environment and to think about climate change and to think about how they work in sync with the local communities that they support around the world. So this is what we're looking to do with this panel. And certainly as a reminder, any questions that you all have, please place it in the chat box and we'll do our best to get to them. So as we segue into the panel, Ms. Simpson, if you don't mind, I'd love for you to kick this off. One of the questions I have for you is, how have you applied what you led and learned during your military service and time at the Pentagon to your current role at Airbus?
Well, thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that. So besides being the Vice President for Research and Technology here at Airbus Americas, so I'm responsible for basically the Western Hemisphere. I'm also the head of sustainability, and I'm leading our Clean Fuels Task Force, which is looking at those alternative sources of energy that might power not only our airliners, which we're most well known for, in our helicopters, but also our spacecraft and our defense systems worldwide. We are, examining a variety of different opportunities, but always something that I remember very strongly from the Department of Defense. The mission comes first, right? It's not enough to say, well, I've got a great novel idea, but it won't actually conduct or support the objectives of the mission, right? So if we're going to be moving people or goods around the world, we still need to have the energy sources to do that. But keeping in mind that sometimes things are evolutionary, and sometimes things are revolutionary. And while we focus on the revolutionary ones, we have to keep that evolutionary progress moving forward.
Yes, absolutely. I think mission comes first, which I think is a nice segue into Mr. Troy Warshall. I'll turn to you next, sir. In your time at the Pentagon, in the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Operational Energy, and now you serve as Associate Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Operational Energy. What advanced technologies are being looked at and leveraged within the Air Force as it relates to energy efficiency, surety, and/or resiliency?
No, thanks, Jen. Appreciate it. And Amanda, great to see you again. It was a pleasure working with you at OSD, and glad to serve on the panel with you. Now, I think the Air Force has an interesting challenge. I mean, obviously our goal is mission first, and that goal is, we got to kill bad guys and break their toys. And that's got to be our focus. We're sort of faced with a bit of a dilemma here, because we're going to be tied to legacy airframes for the foreseeable future. We're looking at keeping the B-52 around for good Lord only knows how much longer. In fact, we're keeping it around so long that we can no longer sustain the engines on it. We have to upgrade the engines just so that we can do the maintenance. Yes, there's an energy implication there, but that's primarily about keeping that airframe flying and giving it, to give the combat support that we need. So there's a mix of stuff we're doing to legacy aircraft. If you look at any airplane out on a ramp today, it's got winglets on it, or other drag reduction devices. And you look at Air Force aircraft, all of our heavy movers don't have that on there, with the exception of the C-17. And the winglets that are on C-17 are probably 30 years old, so they're due for an upgrade in order to increase the efficiency of the aircraft. So we're looking at a number of efficiency initiatives to drive some of that change that we're looking for. And it's not necessarily for the sake of efficiency, saving money, things like that, but it's actually for the purpose of increasing combat capability. If I can get, we've done some studies that have shown that if I can get 10% efficiency increase out of my tankers, I actually have 20% more give that I can give to folks that are going downtown to prosecute the mission. So it's all about, for us, increasing combat capability. Fortunately for us, as the administration changed and the reduction in greenhouse gases mandates came out, that being a tertiary effect of what we're trying to do helps force or drive the change that we're trying to accomplish. So we're really leaning forward into legacy aircraft drag reduction, maintenance procedures like engine washes and things like that, using advanced technologies to increase our time on wing, decrease engine temperatures, things like that, fuel burn. And then, looking forward to those future technologies. A lot of things are really cutting edge stuff that we're looking at. The third stream engine that we need to not only decrease fuel consumption to increase fighter capability, but to power the advanced electronics and be able to get rid of the heat that we end up with as we're looking at that advanced stuff on the battlefield. We're looking at with our tanker fleet and our legacy aircraft cargo fleet. There is no reason that we should not go to a blended wing body aircraft to be able to carry that stuff around. Studies have shown that those blended wing bodies are 30% more efficient than the tube and wing design that they might replace. Now, what does that capability get us? Again, that could be 60% more give in a tanker, or 30% more range, or 30% more cargo that we're able to haul in the cargo aircraft. So, things like that as we look forward to, what our engagements are going to be in the future, and how we're going to capture that technology and make big differences. Because as Amanda said, there's a lot of evolutionary change going back and looking at those drag reduction efforts to maintain our current fleet. But then the evolution or revolutionary part of it is looking at those different ideas, that blended wing body, third stream engine, even things like low gamma radioisotope propulsion that may be able to put into aircraft and keep them up for days or weeks for doing ISR missions, things like that really change the battlefield, reduce the logistic supply chain that ends up being one of our biggest vulnerabilities.
Excellent, Troy. Thank you so much for that extensive overview of what you're all doing within the Air Force. And so as we walk through this panel, so Ms. Simpson and Mr. Warshaw kind of gives this fantastic overview from the Pentagon, Assistant Secretary level, about what's being done. And so now I'd like to turn our focus to installation and bases, and also to get perspective from the Marine Corps. So Colonel Trimble, when you served as commanding officer for U.S. Marine Corps Base Albany, how did your base assist local efforts to recover after Hurricane Michael? And a follow-up question, how is your base prepared to sustain critical operations during this natural disaster? Oh, did we lose Colonel Trimble?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Sorry about
You're
that.
on mute.
I don't know what happened to the video, but thank you, Jennifer. First of all, what a great panel. Amanda, just fabulous folks, fabulous opening there. So thank you all. So can I give you a quick background so I kind of put things in perspective here about, Amanda opened with a great overview of DOD's initiative to really enforce or to really get after energy resiliency or energy security of our military forces, of our DOD forces. And the Marine Corps took that to heart, right? So about 10 years ago. And so we launched an initiative, an energy strategy across the entire Marine Corps to change the ethos, to change the mindset of our warriors to say that energy is important, right? And so even not only on the battlefield, but what you do at home is important because it contributes to the warfighter's readiness. It contributes to our lethality. It gives us more resources to put towards that pointy end of the stick when we conserve and build those energy resilience pieces back here at home. And so we did this a couple of ways. One, we partnered with the local community, right, back in Albany, Georgia, with just a landfill gas generation system. And that gave resources to the community that built resiliency into the installation. That gave us about a 4 megawatt piece. Then next, we had a solar photovoltaic solar farm that we put across. That gave us about 150-acre solar farm, about 32 megawatts. So that's, again, reinforcing the different fuels or different energies to power the installation. And then we went with a three-way partnership with one of the local companies there, Procter & Gamble, the company that makes all of your Bounty paper towels and toilet paper. They had excess steam. We bought that excess steam from them, put in an 8 megawatt generator from that excess steam. So that from that biomass material that they burned. So we had a biomass, we had solar, we had landfill gas. And then we went another step further. We put in or installed a very rare system called a borehole energy storage, a borehole thermal energy storage system that we put in, kind of a new geothermal unit. And all of these energy generation assets managed to, one, build in a great piece of resiliency and energy security into the installation, but it also saved resources so we could put towards that lethal end. And so when you talk about what happened afterwards, right? We put these in for the basis purpose. We put this in for the warfighter's purpose, but it served a dual purpose because when Hurricane Michael came through Southwest Georgia and completely destroyed about 150 mile swath north of the Gulf and 150 miles swath about wide. We were the only installation or only town really that had energy, and for about 3 or 4 day period. And we were able to be a platform to get all of Southwest Georgia back up, to reinstall their energy grid, to get it back online, to take care of all of those Americans out there who were without power, without food, without water for that amount of time. And so that the base served as that. I thought that was a great piece of how we contributed to the local community in that regards. Hopefully that answers your question, Jennifer. I had to go too far off the mark.
No, not at all. No, because definitely I liked how you gave the background too about how your base was already integrating energy efficiency and leveraging renewables and biomass. And then, when a natural disaster hits, which now is, I think we think about climate change, it's going to happen with more frequency. And there is such that need to maintain critical operations. And now, for example, the base that you were leading was not only able to do that for your servicemen and women, you're actually able to also benefit the community, the surrounding community, and essentially keep them afloat and moving forward with critical operations within there. So thank you, sir. Yeah. Fantastic. So now we're going to segue into when we think about military, small business, and innovation. So we've already heard from 3 fabulous speakers, 2 more to go, and these 2 will focus more kind of on the small business and innovation component and how this plugs and plays to the overall energy mission. So Mike Wu, turning it over to you. After your tenure at Air Force Energy and in your current service as an Army JAG, what led you to create your own energy consulting firm? And as a follow-up question, what role did your DoD colleagues and experience at the Pentagon play in supporting your new venture?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jennifer. And let me reiterate, thanks to you for bringing together this panel, but also to the Atlantic Council for bringing together this event, which is so incredibly important. I think the voices that are present throughout this conference are the voices that we need to hear, particularly as it focuses on this mission regarding energy, national security, climate change, and the future of our national security interests. And that's really what drove me to, after working in the Air Force as a senior advisor for energy resilience, having a tremendous former boss, Miranda Ballantyne, who was the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Installations, Environment, and Energy at the time, and having the opportunity really to work at the installation level to stand up a program office, the Air Force Office of Energy Assurance, and to work at the headquarters level, developing energy resilience policies. What I saw was the tremendous challenges in getting those 3 different levels working together within a service and to build a community of practice within a service of folks who are focused on those issues. And that's really what we wanted to do and carry forward in starting Converge Strategies as a consulting firm at the intersection of clean energy, resilience, and national security. And so we really work at 3 levels that I think are actually really well articulated by some of the panelists that you've already heard from. Number 1 is we work directly with the Department of Defense to strengthen their energy resilience initiatives. And we do it in a variety of ways. Number 2, we work with city, states, and private sector partners who want to work with DoD to build stronger military-civilian partnerships because it's absolutely critical that DoD is able to work in its installations, in its defense communities, as Colonel Trimble just articulated in Georgia. And we need to see more examples of that, and we need to highlight those and make them replicable and scalable across the enterprise. And then finally, we work with those same city, states, and private sector partners that have critical energy requirements of their own. Because just as the Department of Defense has developed incredible new capabilities and has become a globally networked force, it has created new requirements for connection and communication and uninterrupted access to electricity, creating domestic installations that have critical missions and facilities that need to maintain uninterrupted access to critical infrastructure. That's true about our commercial sector. That's true about our private sector as well. And so resilience and security, as we really embrace and focus on clean energy deployment as a way of confronting the climate crisis, we also need to think about enshrining resilience and security as fundamental first principles in that transition and in that clean energy revolution. And that's what we focus on at Converge Strategies, and something that we're all very passionate about and mission driven as a team.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate your perspectives. And so certainly last but not least, ML Mackey, Ms. Mackey, as the CEO and co-founder of a small business digital innovator who has successfully won several DoD contracts, could you give us an example of a project or technology your firm worked on that supported energy intelligence to inform and manage consumption?
Absolutely. So good afternoon, and thank you for including Beacon in the conversation today. As Jen mentioned, we're digital innovators. We focus on the transformative effects of digitizing work. Our products streamline performance, driving real-time visibility across operations, maintenance, and sustainment efforts. For the Navy, we delivered SEAS, the Shipboard Energy Assessment System. SEAS is the Energy C2 system, the Energy Command and Control System on the bridge. It provides real-time AI-informed shipboard visibility into operational energy need and availability. SEAS does this by running algorithms that are continuously assessing operational energy use with a live feed of shipboard data. SEAS then provides contextually relevant, real-time actionable intelligence, recommendations about what can be done right now on the ship to increase days on station, that combat capability Mr. Warshall was talking to. It's interesting also in our prep for this panel, Jen, some of the conversations, Colonel Trimble, you talked about how your energy work led to additional innovative CBM Plus impacts for your organization. And conversely, we were working on innovative digital capabilities in the maintenance, the CBM Plus world. And that work had leveraged data that had been previously underutilized or not even collected before. And we discovered that this wealth of operational data, this aggregate real-time picture of both structured and unstructured data, provided the information necessary to deliver informed insight into energy need and availability, and from that to make recommendations on actions for positive energy impact. What I think is important here, and especially relevant for this audience today, is that we did this by listening, by keeping our ears open, by listening to the sailors we were already working with, the folks on the waterfront who were already telling us what they needed to operationalize maintenance work instructions. Because energy was interesting to us in such an overlapping area in terms of the folks we were already working with, we asked them, how do you know how much energy you need? How do you know how much energy you have available? How do you know what energy you're actually using? And then very importantly, we asked them, what do you do about this? How do you act on this? How do you optimize the use of this limited and critical resource? And furthermore, how would they like to if they could do it differently or better? This is how we knew how to bring our technical expertise to bear on the problem. I think it's really important for this crowd of veterans to hear that because of what I just outlined, we were able to deliver capability, innovation that leveraged all the strengths and ingenuity of our technology and experience driven by real world needs. Ms. Simpson, you talked about, I'm going to change your words. I'm holding the meaning. I don't have quite the words, but that whole mission driven, and it has to fit within the mission. It has to be driven by real world needs and within the practical constraints of how that science and that technology can actually be used by the end user. It's why your voices, the veterans listening to this panel that have an interest in energy, you need to be involved in the solving of these problems. Technologists like Beacon, we can deliver the digital capabilities, the tech that's needed. We can facilitate better and more informed operational energy use. But what we really need is to understand exactly what is needed and why from you. Also, how, where, and by whom that tech will be used once deployed. That visceral understanding from the point of performance is invaluable in terms of making a positive impact on operational energy. And I think this active engagement by informed end users is critical to the success of energy projects. So those are my 2 cents. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Jen.
Excellent. Thanks, ML. But don't go too far because we got a question from the audience, and I think you may be the perfect person to kick off the reply. So going into the chat box, one of the questions from our audience was, in your opinion, do DoD acquisition and funding mechanisms potentially limit our ability to acquire energy efficient and resilient equipment? So, certainly I think about, SBIR, you have extensive work there, but certainly for the rest of the panel to kind of think about how you've seen acquisition and funding evolve within your offices to essentially create a straighter line between if I'm an innovator and have a really cool energy technology, how can I get that in the hands of the warfighter quicker? And I think the DoD has done some really interesting work in this space, whether it be SBIR, folks like AFWorks or Army Futures Command. We've seen this evolution happen. But I kind of pose that question to the panel, and certainly anyone that would like to answer it, please do. But ML, I think maybe that might be a good segue to talk about how you leveraged SBIR funding and how that was, for you, an example of a quicker route to get funding.
Yeah, all I can say is, Jen, from your lips to God's ears, that straight line from the innovator to the warfighter. I think we're getting a lot closer, but plenty of room for smart minds to throw on there. One of the challenges when you bring something that is, what's that statement? Innovation is at the intersection of domains. So it's fantastic when you can cross domains. It's also a challenge when you're kind of like everybody's cousin, but nobody's direct family member. Like resourcing stovepipes are so focused in certain directions that when you do this kind of operational point of performance, I can implement equipment that has these energy driving capabilities, but people are buying equipment for different focused reasons. Like I know that in working with the Navy, with some of the work we did with them and some of their thoughtfulness about how they acquire, they changed policy that said we have energy-driven maintenance actions now, right? And working with the Air Force and the work that we're doing with them, they said we need to be thoughtful and they stood up the Rapid Sustainment Office that says we can acquire across stovepipes. So I think there's a variety of opportunities. I will share, and perhaps this is meaningful for your veterans who are either considering being entrepreneurs themselves or as they look at their path into industry, want to explore the small business portion of the defense industrial base, that the SBIR program is a really interesting, dare I say, non-stovepiped resource. Like we were kind of, I sometimes joke and say we were unfettered by reality. We could go talk to the end users, but I didn't have to come from HM&E or combat systems or, this syscom or that syscom. I just went and said, how do you work? What do you need? And therefore, what systems should we integrate to and what information do you need in order to optimize your work? So I think the SBIR program is great, but it really needs the input of real world experience, bringing that to the scientists and the technologists and the innovators. So I would encourage the people listening to this call to either think about engaging with the SBIR program directly or reach out to the SBIR programs and make yourself available in your transition period to maybe intern or do a residency at a small business or just help give some feedback to their process. It would give you some exposure to how small business portion of the industrial base works. And it certainly would bring that really value add realistic perspective into the development of the innovation. All right, I can obviously go on and on about this and I really should stop and I will now.
I'd like to add a point that, I think what the question kind of drove to is the evaluating the full life cycle cost and supportability of any system. And that's something that, was added, nearly a decade ago, which was including energy in the evaluation of the cost of a system. It wasn't just about the acquisition, the upfront capital investment, but what is it going to actually take to maintain the system? So as renewable assets, as more efficient articles were brought to bear or offered to the department, they have indeed oftentimes been engaged and won out above the least expensive system to bring what is the best value to the department. And again, keeping in mind the ability to conduct the mission and to be effective in our operations. So I certainly wanted to get that out there. Hopefully that will complete the answer to that question. But Michael has something to say.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. And first of all, that question is from Maddie Carroll, who's a really tremendous person in this Veterans Advanced Energy community. She's a transitioning Marine Corps helicopter pilot and Marine Corps officer who I think would be a wonderful addition to anybody who's interested in somebody who has like a firsthand experience of the relationship between weapon systems and platforms and the critical infrastructure and fuel supplies and logistics that support those weapon systems and platforms. And I think, due to a lot of the work that Amanda did, that Troy did, and continues to do in the Pentagon, and that many other folks in this operational energy community have contributed to, there is a recognition, I think, within those communities about the relationship between logistics and supportability and mission capability, but it's very, I would say, nascent and on the margins. And I think what we need to be able to do is really reevaluate how the entire process of acquisition and ensure that those weapon systems and platforms that we're developing for the next generation and the critical infrastructure and logistics support that those weapon systems and platforms require is treated as one and the same. It has to be treated from our wargaming, from our operational planning perspectives, as absolutely inextricably intertwined. And hopefully, those kinds of changes will be what's required to drive the total revolution in our force structure to confront what we expect to be an increasingly difficult, complicated, and volatile strategic environment that we're going to face all around the world, including here at home.
And if I could pile on from Michael a little bit, I think the logistical challenge in Iraq and Afghanistan was not relatively that difficult. Not saying that there weren't a lot of lives lost in that, but when you look at the logistical challenge in supplying fuel and energy to the pointy edge in PACOM or in EUCOM, that's a whole different story. And the changes that we make now, I mean, even stuff like training and education so that folks understand what the options are, how to better plan flights, or all those sort of things go a long way into making the whole holistic energy picture more supportable. The procurement end of it, obviously, trying to short circuit some of the decades long acquisition process and get things, faster, quicker, better, while they're still relevant, rather than delivering a software system that's a decade old and we wonder why we can't operate it on our latest computers. Those sort of things are really having an impact, and we're driving airmen forward in innovation, making sure that we're integrated with those folks so that when they ask a question or if there is a problem, they're involved in the development of the solution, so that oftentimes we'll see, hey, I'm from the Pentagon, I'm here to help. And that's the last thing anybody wants. So, if you tie those people in and get them in as part of the process and they take some ownership of it, now you have the ability to really short circuit that acquisition process, move things forward very quickly, and make sure that the end user gets what they need to be able to accomplish their mission.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I know even with some of the work that Tech Connect does with the DoD community, and we run pitch challenge sessions, and we try and get as many non-traditional innovators in front of the DoD leadership that we have today. And so I think even what we've tried to do over the past decade with Tech Connect is talk to our audience and innovators about it's not like you go to our event and the Pentagon brings that really extra large checkbook and they see something they like and they're just going to write out a check. That's typically not how it happens. And they also need to learn too how this whole process works and what, certain technology will work for certain services, but maybe not for others. One of our good friends, Jim Cayley at Navy Op Energy, when he is a review panelist at our conferences, one time an innovator was talking about a really cool technology, and his only question was, if I throw a grenade at it, will it still work? And it's like, everyone was like, what? But then it's like, what? This is kind of like from the Marine Corps. When you're in a contested environment, these need to work in certain, conditions.
That's so Jim.
Isn't that so Jim? Oh my God.
Yeah, you're going to
very
start seeing the
deadpan,
Marines are taking over. The Marines are taking over the operational energy space.
They are. They are. So it's that type of feedback that I think we get in forums such as what the Atlantic Council is doing, what my work at Tech Connect does, is really trying to create this community and level of engagement and education, and to have all of you be just very transparent about not only your role within DoD Energy, but then what you're facing in terms of challenges, and to look at all of us to figure out, okay, how can we best support you? And that's what's so fantastic about these types of forums and panels. And it's that type of honesty that just keeps everything moving forward and keeps supporting the mission the best way that we can. So I think to kind of maybe build on that question, for certainly veterans, small businesses, as I was mentioning earlier, non-traditional innovators, really kind of looking to help support this energy battle and fight. In addition to certainly the Atlantic Council's work, we've also covered SBIR with ML. Certainly, are there any other groups or projects or funding opportunities that you all would recommend? This could be internships, this could be grant funding, and just any example you could give to our audience would be fantastic.
One of the projects or programs that the department has really embraced is the SPC program. which allows for businesses to come in and provide improvements, particularly at military bases, and then get paid from the efficiency savings that come out of that. And it could be anything from replacing an old boiler or even replacing the light bulbs in a building. And then a calculation is done on how much energy was saved. And then that small business can get paid from those savings. There's a lot of little innovative projects like that are scattered about. And Jennifer, I did want to elaborate on one other thing that you talked about, which was education, right? It's not only education outside of the department, it's education within the department. We have millions of uniformed, people who need to understand their impact on energy and what that means for the sustainability of our forces. And with that, there are thus millions of potential innovators who can think about how they can then apply a solution to a problem that their command may not even know about. And it's driving those solutions up the chain that will indeed, bring those revolutionary ideas to bear. And we've seen some quite amazing, when I was in the building, some really quite amazing ideas that really came from the frontline foot soldiers, Marines, et cetera. It was, and that we need to continue to encourage. And when those people then become veterans, when they leave the force, to then encourage the continued development of those ideas so that they can be applied to the future.
Organize and structure it in ways in which DoD and the rest of the federal government can access and collaborate with more effectively. So just last month, we did a launch event for the Resilient Infrastructure and Secure Energy Consortium, the RISE Consortium, actually partnered with the Atlantic Council to do an event. We had some really spectacular speakers and leaders from within government and also the private sector partner to talk about things that they were working on, requirements and problems and challenges that were coming from the department, and new innovations and capabilities that are coming from the private sector, and how those applications could happen more effectively in a scaled way. One of the real challenges is that we have this incredibly robust and innovative ecosystem of energy and climate entrepreneurs, and they just don't want to work with the federal government because they don't want to deal with a 3 to 5 year business development cycle. They don't want to deal with, creating an entirely new federal business development practice. And that's why we created the RISE Consortium as a forum and a convening capability to really bring together that community, along with the folks who need access to that community, folks like Troy and others in government and DoD that need access to those innovative solutions. And so since then, we've grown extremely rapidly. We have more than 150 members of the RISE Consortium today. They're all sorts of companies. They're not just technology startups, but they include utilities. They include nonprofits, DOE national laboratories, some of the real leaders in this field. And we'll be holding an event upcoming at your Tech Connect event in Resilience Week, October 18th to 21st in DC at National Harbor. You can find out more about that at rise-consortium.org. And you can also sign up if you're interested, both from a government standpoint, but also from a tech innovator standpoint. It's free. It's a one-page membership agreement. And again, you can just go to rise-consortium.org, which is something I'll share in the chat for more information.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Anyone else would like to comment on that question?
I will weigh in as a non-traditional defense contractor that had to learn a new language, learn a new cadence. Mike, if there's any lessons learned I can share with you so that others don't bleed the same way I am, all in, I'll join your consortium right away. But I think it's important for those of us that, and now I think of myself as someone who at least peripherally understands the defense marketplace a little better, to be really careful with articulating what the expectations are, how acquisitions are made, and what the motivation is. Mr. Worshall, you talked to increased combat capability versus energy efficiency, the tertiary effect of reducing greenhouse emissions. You just have to sort of translate. It's two sides of the same coin, but you need to translate between that commercial and defense driver to really understand that dual use. And then you have to understand how to deliver differently. I think this is a whole other panel topic, but I started to twitch as you talked about it, so I thought I'd share.
No, I'll jump in right on ML's heels there. She's right. Serving as an installation commander, a lot of times I would get folks who would pitch things to me that I don't need, right? And so I would caution those who are going out to market, whatever solutions that you have to ensure that individual command or installation or unit, whatever you're pitching it to, it's something that solves their problem. Because there's a lot of problems, but what's not needed is another new solution that doesn't solve the problem. And then another thing that I would add too, and I think Amanda talked about the ESEP or ESERP, the funding that comes along. A lot of times you'll get installations who are pushing the leading edge, who are really out there trying to innovate and really drive DoD to the next level of either energy efficiency or energy security. Again, the primary focus being the lethality and the resiliency or readiness for our forces. And so anytime that you go out to, I say pitch, probably too strong of a word, but anytime that you go to do that, you got to solve a problem, and it's got to help the pointy end of the stick either improve readiness or realign resources so that you can improve readiness or be more lethal. And so if you couch it in those terms, I think you'll be very successful.
Thank you, sir. And so I think, and this kind of brings in one of the questions we got from our audience was certainly the DoD is probably the largest landowner in the world and also the largest energy consumer. So I think even Colonel Trimble talking about some people have really cool technologies, but you literally just cannot execute on it. It's impossible to do. And so I think kind of like, as, and this may be a good way to kind of close out the panel, as you think about, because it's quite a behemoth of a challenge when you think about it, to how do you become this, energy warrior? How do you kind of make a change in this very large organization? Any kind of thoughts you have on that would be fantastic to kind of close out the panel, to kind of give us all something to think about, and also, different ways we can help support all of you moving forward.
Well, I'll take the first stab at it if you don't mind, Jennifer. So I think one of the things that you got to understand is we're at a current state and we've invested a lot to get there, right? And so how do you help us transition from where we are today to where we need to be? And in the energy sector, one of the things that we did was we really invested in AI and ML so that we could become more efficient with the energy use that we have and the tools and resources that we have. So that investment was minimum at that point. It was also scalable, right? So you design something that's scalable, that's flexible so that you can use it in multiple areas. And then the last part I'll leave you with is the lessons that we learned from those AI and ML solutions that we were trying to apply to an enterprise type environment. Those same lessons we were able to take and apply to other parts of the business, like Amanda had mentioned earlier, that GAO came out with a study that said their depots were the choke points for our warfighters. Well, we had learned some lessons from our energy use or from our AI and ML studies of energy to apply those same types of tools to the depot process and the depot maintenance process and learn to save lots of resources in that area that we could put towards either invest in greater or invest in better resources or invest in better technology or put at the lethal end of the pointy end. So again, it's helping us make that transition, and whatever solution you have, help us make that transition to something better.
No, I think it's important to point out that while the Department of Defense is one of the largest landholders, I think only behind the Department of Interior. And it is a large energy user on its own right. It is a small fraction, unfortunately, or fortunately, on the world scale or even on a national scale in energy demand. And so to that end, the Department of Defense does not drive energy prices, right, through the demand for power and fuel. It does not command or can direct what is consumed or what development needs to be. But on the other hand, it sometimes knows how to act as a single unit to make requests of the private sector to help make advancements. And that's where the department can act to push things forward, to bring some innovation into the ecosystem. So something to also keep in mind is, as the ecosystem is changing, and we're seeing a big shift. I mean, you heard from some folks yesterday from the automobile manufacturers, how they're expanding the use of battery electric vehicles for hydrogen-powered fuel cell vehicles, that several of them are moving completely away from internal combustion engines. We're seeing the same thing in long-haul trucking, a little bit in rail, in marine. So as the move becomes away from petroleum products, for instance, what are our ships? What are our planes? What of our trucks, of our tanks, of our vehicles for the military? How are we going to adapt, right? We can't be the last user out there. Otherwise, the fuel won't be available on a global scale, or it will be so expensive that we won't be able to operate our fleets anymore. So how do we be part of that shift, right? So that we're ready for the future that is in the process of becoming reality. More things to think about, but indeed, how can we engage on behalf of the Defense Department or assist the Defense Department if we're on the outside?
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda. So Troy, Emma, Mike, any closing thoughts on that question or what you've heard from the panelists just now?
I could take a stab at what I think is important. I think it's important that we look at all the new innovations, but it's really critical that we learn how to operate what we have in place more efficiently. And I think for the panelists, for the folks listening to us on this panel today, you have the knowledge, the information that helps tune. It's everybody has a step in it. So how do you make sure you get that information back into the process? And how do we make sure that we can, in an evolution sense versus a revolution, continue to maintain our infrastructure and provide that resiliency that near-term climate impacts are going to require? So I think being really thoughtful about how we operate, maintain, and sustain our equipment and drive feedback from that experience is critical to positive energy impact.
Yeah, absolutely, ML, and I think I'll jump on too. That is the DoD's largest burner of fuel. I think we have some very low-hanging fruit that we can capitalize on. I mean, things like putting finlets on a C-17 might cost me about $3 million to do the entire fleet. And in the first year, it'll save me 1% of my fuel budget, about $10 million on that airframe alone. So there are some very big projects that can be done that have a very high payoff when it comes to energy efficiency, greenhouse gas reduction, things like that. So again, we need to make sure that we're considering those evolutionary changes while we're looking at the revolutionary changes. Right now there is no combination of elements on the periodic table that's going to create a battery that has as much energy as fossil fuels do right now. So for long haul aircraft, things like that, where if you run out of battery power, it's generally a bad thing. If you do it in a truck, it's one thing, but an airplane, it's a whole different story. So I think we need those innovations to continue. I think there's a great potential for short haul electrification for aircraft. So we're looking at all those things, trying to figure out how to fit it in, how to pull it together. Over.
Yeah, Troy, I think that's a tremendous segue. I mean, I think the important thing to remember about all of this is that we have to make this problem big enough to solve. And we are talking about the greatest challenge of collective action in the course of human civilization. And so the good news is that everything that Troy described, everything that Amanda described about investments that we need to make to strengthen our military's force structure, to strengthen our military's energy resilience posture, to strengthen our military's approach to an increasingly volatile strategic environment, those are exactly the same things that we need to do to strengthen our capability of withstanding attacks from determined adversaries, from being able to operate more effectively, more efficiently for longer, and more capably. And those are also all the same investments that we need to make for our civilian economy, for our private sector, for the capability of maintaining our economic and national security, and for creating the next generation of technologies that we can export around the world from a global competitiveness standpoint. So we should be doing all of it. The evolutionary innovations that Troy was outlining, the revolutionary investments that we need to be making on transforming our approach to powering our military and our economy. Those are all investments that we need to be making today. And one of the things that gives me a lot of encouragement and hope is that, you know, in many ways, this pandemic has taken off some of the restrictor plates that we were artificially imposing on ourselves about trying to tackle big problems. And I think that we have a unique opportunity in front of us to try to tackle, you know, again, the greatest challenge of collective action we'll ever face, with the size, scale, and speed necessary to really confront those challenges.
Well, I think that's a perfect closing to this panel. So certainly we thank you all for joining this panel. A big thank you to our panelists and to our keynote, Ms. Simpson, for being here to share your perspectives. If you'd like to rewatch today's event or share the stream with a colleague, a replay will be available on the Atlantic Council YouTube channel and on the social media platforms. So coming up next in the program, tune in at 4 p.m. Eastern for an exciting conversation on the geopolitics of the energy transition. And over the next hour, don't miss the opportunity to engage with recruiters from San Diego Gas and Electric and ENI. And if you're interested in becoming a Veterans Advanced Energy Fellow, please join our information session at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all again for your time, and a big thanks to the Atlantic Council for hosting us today.